Imagine you go to sleep tonight in your own bed. It's, just a completely normal evening. But while you are deeply unconscious, a futuristic machine perfectly scans your brain and body, creates an exact molecule-for-molecule clone of you, places the clone in the bed, and then painlessly, instantly vaporizes the original you.
Oh, wow. Starting heavy today.
Right. So tomorrow morning, the sun comes up. The alarm goes off. A person wakes up, turns off the alarm, and remembers going to sleep. From the inside perspective of the person waking up, there was absolutely no gap. I mean, the stream of consciousness feels perfectly uninterrupted. So did you survive? Or did you die?
And if you died, who exactly is the person making the coffee?
Exactly. Today, in this deep dive, we're going to prove why the physics of our universe suggests the answer to that question is, well, far stranger, and honestly far more demanding than a simple yes or no.
Because it really is the ultimate puzzle of identity. When we strip away all the assumptions we have about, who we are left with a very unsettling realization. Our everyday intuition about what it means to be someone moving through time is almost certainly an illusion.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We are incredibly excited to have you with us again.
Yeah.
Now, if you were with us for our last deep dive, we spent our time analyzing an essay called Beyond the Bridge and the broader work of philosopher Thomas W. Clark.
Right, where we systematically took apart the traditional fear of death.
Yeah, we dismantled this pervasive, almost instinctual idea that death is an experience of darkness. We realized that anticipating a plunge into an empty black abyss where you just float in nothingness forever is a logical contradiction.
Exactly. By definition, non-experience cannot be experienced. You just can't be present to witness your own absence.
And we ended up introducing this radically different framework where the self isn't a solid, indestructible curl, but rather a bundle of relations.
Yeah, we laid the foundation by establishing the core truth of what is known as generic subjective continuity, or GSC. That principle is elegantly simple at its core, really. It just says only experience is experienced. You never ever witness the gap of your own unconsciousness.
But, I mean, while establishing that non-experience is never lived through is a profound comfort, it is only the first step, right?
Oh, absolutely. It leads us directly to a much more treacherous philosophical cliff edge.
Which is exactly the mission for this deep dive. If we accept that core intuition, that from the inside the lights are only ever on, does that actually mean you continue after death? What exactly is the self if it isn't a solid object doing the experiencing?
Right. Because if a surgeon can't find a soul with an MRI, what is the actual mechanism moving forward through time?
That is the central tension we have to resolve. If experience always gives way to experience without a gap, who or what is inheriting the next moment?
We have a massive amount of ground to cover today. We are going to deconstruct the idea of the soul as a metaphysical traveler.
And we're going to examine the bizarre, mind-bending physics of Einstein's relativity and block time. We'll show how they actively shatter our comforting stories about personal continuation.
And finally, we will explore how abandoning the traditional self completely changes the ethics of bringing new life into the world. It's heavy, it is scientifically rigorous, and it will fundamentally alter how you view your own existence.
Okay, let's unpack this. We need to start by examining the exact moment where the comfort of generic subjective continuity transforms into a philosophical trap.
Yeah, because it is a highly seductive trap, precisely because it's built on an undeniable phenomenological truth.
Hold on, let's define that term before we go further.
Yeah.
Phenomenological truth. When we talk about phenomenology here, we just mean the study of how things feel directly from the first-person perspective, right?
Exactly.
Like the subjective reality of being you,
Yeah.
completely separate from what a scientist might measure from the outside.
Right. Phenomenology is about the raw, lived experience. And the phenomenological truth of GSC is best illustrated by general anesthesia. I mean, it's the most visceral example we have.
Oh, for sure.
When you go under, the anesthesiologist asks you to count backward. You hit 8, maybe 7, and then boom. The chemical suspension of your consciousness is absolute. Subjective time stops.
Right, and the very next conscious moment you possess is waking up in the recovery room.
Exactly.
And from your inside perspective, the 3 hours of surgery literally did not happen. You didn't wait in a dark room. You didn't experience the void.
Not at all.
The experience of counting 7 and the experience of hearing a nurse say, "wake up," are perfectly seamlessly stitched together.
This is the weak claim of generic subjective continuity. And frankly, as a descriptive fact of human experience, it is bulletproof. You cannot wake up inside non-experience.
Right.
The Greek philosopher Epicurus captured this perfectly thousands of years ago when he said, "When I am, death is not, and when death is, I am not." Experience fundamentally cannot encounter its own absence.
Okay, I'm completely on board with the weak claim. The math checks out. I cannot experience not experiencing. But how does that become a trap?
Well, the trap springs shut when people take that undeniable phenomenological fact and quietly mutate it into the strong claim of GSC.
Right, the strong claim? How's that different?
The strong claim takes the observation that there is no experienced gap and turns it into a metaphysical guarantee. It basically says, because experience cannot be absent to itself, I will always experience again. It assumes that because the gap doesn't exist subjectively, personal identity must somehow bridge the biological death of the body.
I see the sleight of hand there. It takes the comfort of, I won't experience nothingness, and stretches it into, I will definitely be the one experiencing whatever happens next.
Yes.
It turns a lack of an abyss into a promise of reincarnation.
Precisely. And this is where we have to introduce a vital framework called internalism. Internalism is a philosophical stance that looks at strong GSC and rigorously rejects its conclusion.
Okay, break that down for me.
So, internalism fully agrees that only experience is experienced. But it insists that just because there is no experience gap, that does not imply a personal subject is moving through a sequence of experiences.
Like a passenger hopping between train cars.
Exactly. There's no passenger hopping cars.
Let me, push back on this a bit, because I want to test the mechanics of what you're saying. Let's use a physical analogy.
Sure.
I'm sitting in a movie theater watching an old-school physical film projection. The projector skips a missing reel. Let's say the reel was destroyed. On screen, I see the hero walking toward a door. There's a literal physical gap in the celluloid. And the very next frame, the projector shines on the screen, shows the hero inside the room.
Okay, tracking with you.
From my perspective in the audience, the movie just kept going. I didn't see the missing celluloid. So if there's an experience before and an experience after, and the gap isn't witnessed, why can't we call that continuity? I mean, the subjective movie of my life continued.
What's fascinating here is that we need to look closer at why you, the audience member, felt the movie continued. Why did you assume the person in the room was the exact same hero who was previously in the hallway?
Well, because the visual data matches. The actor's wearing the same jacket. The plot dictates that he was trying to get into the room, so him being in the room is the logical next step. I mean, the narrative holds together.
Exactly. The narrative holds together because of what internalism calls internal relations.
Internal relations.
Okay. There is visual consistency, there is causal logic, there is a shared architectural structure between the frame before the cut and the frame after the cut. Those shared relations are what bridge the gap.
I see.
It is not merely the absence of a blank screen that makes the movie continuous. It is the active presence of those structural internal connections.
But wait, even if the plot connects, the literal film strip has a physical gap. Why does the internal logic override the physical gap? Because if my brain dies, the physical film strip is burned.
Because an unexperienced gap is fundamentally not the same thing as an experienced bridge. This is the absolute core of the internalist critique.
Okay, that makes sense.
Strong GSC tries to dissolve the fear of the dark void, which is mathematically correct, but then it treats the mere absence of that void as if it were a literal, load-bearing bridge carrying your specific soul to a new destination.
So just skipping the blank space isn't enough to guarantee identity?
No, it is not. Internalism argues that a relation cannot be a relation from nowhere. If one moment of experience is supposed to be continuous with a future moment of experience, there has to be an internally available field that binds them.
Like memory.
Memory. Causal biological dependence, the ongoing integration of a body. Without those internal relations doing the heavy lifting, claiming the next experience in the universe belongs to you is just a trick of language.
Wow. Let me make sure I'm translating this correctly.
Right.
You're saying the strong GSC enthusiast starts by completely dissolving the experiencer into the experience.
Right.
They say, look, there's no little pilot in your head waiting in the dark while the anesthesia works. There's just the experience itself. But then when confronted with biological death, they panic.
They panic and say, don't worry, you will wake up in the next experience.
Yeah, that is the exact contradiction. If you successfully dissolve the experiencer into the experience, there is no hidden traveler left to pack its bags and carry your personal identity across the void of death.
Right. You cannot deny the existence of a soul to avoid the fear of the dark room, and then suddenly invent a soul to guarantee you get the keys to the next room.
It's wanting to have your metaphysical cake and eat it too. So if an unexperienced gap isn't a bridge, and there is no soul carrying the luggage, what actually does bridge the gaps in our daily lives?
Well, let's look at it.
Because I went to sleep last night and I woke up this morning and the internal relations held. I feel like the same person. This brings us to the tangible reality of what we call the human bundle.
Right. If we completely banish the idea of a hidden metaphysical pearl or a conductor steering the train of consciousness, what is left of the self? Under internalism, the self is defined exclusively by the internal organization of the bundle.
So the self isn't the owner of the bundle. The self is the bundle.
Precisely. The self is the complex, highly integrated web of memory, anticipation, bodily proprioception, autobiographical narrative, and the ongoing causal development of the brain. It is a biological and psychological pattern.
Okay, so let's tackle the phenomenon of sleep, because this is where a lot of people get tripped up.
Yeah.
People who defend strong GSC constantly point to sleep as their trump card.
They do, constantly.
They argue, look, my consciousness disappears every single night. There is a massive gap. And yet I survive it. Therefore, my identity can survive an unconscious gap. Death is just a longer, more permanent gap.
It is a very intuitive argument, but internalism counters it aggressively. Sleep is not a pure case of generic subjective continuity.
It's not.
No, sleep is a heavily contaminated case. When you fall asleep, you are relying on massive, robust, profoundly ordinary continuity conditions to maintain your identity.
Oh, let's trace the physical mechanism there. When I am in deep, dreamless sleep, my consciousness might be at zero, but my biological organism is still furiously active.
Yes, your brain maintains its incredibly complex causal and neurological structure throughout the night. Even if the subjective phenomenal field dims or vanishes, the physical hard drive is still powered on, maintaining the data architecture.
Right, my heart is pumping blood to my cortex.
Exactly. When you wake up, your memory systems boot up from where they left off. Your personality traits are structurally intact in your synapses. The waking subject directly inherits the bodily and psychological context of the subject who fell asleep.
So the reason I survive sleep isn't some magical philosophical property where consciousness hops over a gap.
Yeah.
It's because the physical causal bridge never actually broke. The biological machinery just went into standby mode.
That's it. Sleep is not a proof of identity surviving absence. It is proof that ordinary biological continuity can survive a temporary lapse in awareness. Contrast that directly with death.
Right, death is different.
Death destroys the local process entirely. Death stops the oxygenation of the brain. It disintegrates the physical structure. The causal chain collapses. The memory files are not just put on standby. The hardware storing them decays into dust.
Going back to the movie theater, the movie projector isn't just paused. It is physically smashed with a hammer.
Exactly. So if a moment of experience occurs somewhere else in the universe after your death, say a baby is born in another city a week later, that baby's experience has zero internal relation to your deceased bundle.
Not at all.
There is no shared memory, no shared neural architecture, no causal link. Calling that baby your continuation just because consciousness happened to spark again is intellectually incoherent. It smuggled in a ghost that simply does not exist.
I want to really test the limits of this bundle theory. Let's explore a thought experiment derived from Thomas W. Clark's work. Let's look at the Rip Van Winkle transformation scenario because it forces us to separate the survival of the body from the survival of the self.
It is a brilliant stress test for our intuitions about identity. Walk us through it.
Okay, imagine a person, let's use the initials TC. TC enters a highly advanced futuristic hibernation pod. He goes to sleep. Centuries pass.
Okay.
The pod is designed to keep his biological organism alive, but it deliberately tinkers with his neural pathways while he sleeps. When the pod opens, he wakes up as TC modified. His taste buds have been altered, so he hates coffee now. His political temperament has been shifted. He's slightly more neurotic.
Sounds rough.
Right. He is demonstrably different, but he still retains his core memories of entering the pod. He still fundamentally identifies as TC.
In that scenario, personal subjective continuity is preserved, albeit stretched. The internal relations, the memories, the broad strokes of the autobiographical narrative, they hold the bundle together. The movie sequel has a slightly different tone, but it's clearly the same franchise.
Right. But let's rewind and run the pod program again, pushing it to the extreme. TC goes to sleep. But this time the pod scrambles everything. It radically alters his epigenetics. It completely wipes his autobiographical memory and replaces it with the artificially generated memories of a 19th century blacksmith.
Oh, wow.
It restructures his personality traits completely. When the pod finally opens, the being that steps out is TC radical, radically changed. Now, from an outside objective perspective, we would all look at this blacksmith and agree TC is dead. The original person who entered the pod is completely gone. A totally new psychological entity has woken up in that biological shell.
The bundle of internal relations has been completely violently severed. The narrative continuity is broken beyond repair.
But here is the paradox. From the inside perspective of the blacksmith, there was absolutely no gap. Right.
The blacksmith wakes up feeling like they have always been present, just like you and I do. The very last conscious experience the original TC had was the sensation of falling asleep in the pod. The very first conscious experience the blacksmith has is waking up, stretching, and wondering where his anvil is.
Exactly.
Even though the original TC essentially died in that pod, experience itself just chugged right along without encountering an abyss of nothingness.
This is what Clark refers to as death by transformation, and it is a profound realization. Destroying personal subjective continuity, ending a specific, unique self, does not create a black abyss of nothingness between subjects.
That's wild to think about.
Death is functionally equivalent to this radical transformation.
Yeah.
The context of awareness changes entirely, the internal relations are annihilated, the original person is gone forever, but experience itself does not witness a gap.
You die, but the darkness never arrives. Yet the person who wakes up isn't you. It's just, a new center of experience lighting up. Yes. And this realization completely shatters the comforting illusion of strong GSC. If death breaks our specific bundle of relations, GSC tries to comfort us by insisting, don't worry, the stream of experience will pick up somewhere else, and that will be your stream.
But it won't.
But physics, the actual observable mechanics of our universe, actively prevents this comforting narrative from working.
This is the perfect transition, because this is where the philosophy collides head-on with cosmology. We need to talk about smashing the cosmic cue. Let's examine the one death followed by others thought experiment.
Okay, imagine a simplified universe to test this mechanism. In this hypothetical universe, there is currently only one conscious being alive. Let's call her Being A.
Being A, got it.
Being A lives her life, and then she dies. For a period of time, there is zero consciousness in this entire universe. Then, on a dozen different planets scattered across the galaxies, 10,000 new conscious alien beings are born roughly around the same time.
Okay, the parameters are set. One death, a period of silence, followed by 10,000 scattered births.
Now, pose the strong GSC question to this scenario. Which one of those 10,000 newborn aliens is the next experience for Being A? Where does Being A's specific stream of consciousness go?
It really forces you to visualize the absurdity of the mechanism. If you are defending strong GSC, you have to explain the routing system.
Exactly. If GSC claims one of them is the continuation, then it owes us an explanation of why that specific one, what is the selector, what physical or metaphysical mechanism reached out across the vacuum of space and specifically chose alien number 4502 in the Andromeda Galaxy to be the reincarnation of Being A while ignoring the other 9,999.
It's like imagining a cosmic DMV waiting room. When you die, your soul pulls a paper ticket, sits in some metaphysical waiting area outside of space-time, and waits for the universe to call your number over the loudspeaker. Ticket number 8 billion, please proceed to available biological vessel on planet Earth.
Right.
But we've already established that the self is just a bundle of biological and psychological relations.
Exactly. There is no metaphysical ticket holder standing outside the bundle. If the bundle is destroyed at death, there is literally nothing left to stand in the cosmic queue.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate. What if the strong GSC defender says, fine, there's no selector. Being A doesn't go into just one of them. Being A becomes all 10,000 aliens simultaneously.
Well, if you concede that, you have completely abandoned the concept of individual personal identity. You are no longer talking about generic subjective continuity preserving a specific self. You've collapsed into a totally different framework called open individualism, which we will dissect shortly.
What about the branching problem? Say Being A goes to sleep, and mad scientists perfectly clone her brain and body into two identical vessels. They wake up at the exact same time. Which one is the next experience of Being A?
The branching problem is fatal to the idea of a traveling soul. If personal identity demands a single continuous path and we perfectly duplicate the internal relations into two bodies, the system breaks. It forces the theory to expose the conductor. If the stream of consciousness has to choose one branch over the other, you have smuggled a magical chooser back into the equation.
So the idea of a next experience is already buckling under logical pressure. But then Albert Einstein enters the chat and essentially drops a bomb on the entire concept of next. Let's talk about the relativity argument, because I think this is the most devastating critique we have.
I agree. Strong GSC relies absolutely on a strict chronological sequence. It requires an objective, universal timeline. It imagines reality like a giant grandfather clock ticking away. Experience A happens, then the clock ticks, a gap occurs, the clock ticks again, and experience B happens. Experience B is objectively next.
It assumes that the universe has a master timekeeper.
But Einstein's theory of special relativity proved over a century ago that this master timekeeper does not exist. There is no absolute simultaneous now that spans the universe. The order in which events happen depends entirely on the frame of reference of the observer.
Okay, let's pause. Space-like separated events. I know this is a physics term. Let's unpack the actual mechanism of relativity here, because it's deeply counterintuitive.
It is. Let's use Einstein's classic train thought experiment to visualize why a universal now is impossible. Imagine a train moving incredibly fast along a track. You are standing perfectly still on the platform, watching it go by.
Okay, I'm on the platform.
Lightning strikes the front of the train and the back of the train at what you perceive to be the exact same time. The light from both strikes reaches your eyes simultaneously. To you, standing on the platform, the strikes are objectively simultaneous.
Got it. I see two flashes at once.
But now imagine a passenger sitting exactly in the middle of that fast-moving train. Because the train is rushing toward the light coming from the front strike and moving away from the light coming from the back strike, the light from the front hits their eyes a fraction of a second before the light from the back. To the passenger on the train, the front strike happened first.
Oh, wow. And because the speed of light is an absolute constant for all observers, neither of you is experiencing an optical illusion. You are both measuring reality correctly.
Exactly. Time literally bends to accommodate the constant speed of light. Because of this, there is no single true order of events. Now, apply this to the cosmos. If a star explodes in a distant galaxy, and at what you think is the exact same moment a baby is born on Earth, those two events are what physicists call space-like separated. The distance between them is so vast that light cannot travel between them.
So if I'm flying by Earth in a spaceship at near light speed, the way time dilates for me means I might calculate that the baby was born 100 years before the star exploded.
Yes. And an alien flying in the opposite direction at near light speed would calculate that the star exploded 100 years before the baby was born.
That is insane.
All three observers, you on Earth, the first pilot, the second pilot, are completely mathematically correct according to the laws of physics.
Which means the concept of simultaneous is just a local illusion. There's no slice of reality you can point to and say, this is the objective, N now W, for the entire cosmos.
And if there is no absolute cosmic now, the entire philosophical idea of a next experience becomes scientifically meaningless.
Let me trace the logic there. If there's no universal present, you physically cannot have a cosmic cue. You can't have a soul waiting in line for the next available body, because time itself isn't a single straight line that everyone agrees on.
Precisely. Without a simultaneous now, there is no cosmic waiting room. How can your consciousness hop to the next available biological vessel if physics dictates there is no objective, factual answer to what next even is? If two babies are born in different galaxies, relativity tells us there is no fundamental truth about which one was born first. So which one gets your subjective continuity? The question itself is broken. It violates the architecture of space-time.
Relativity is a physical constraint on metaphysical stories. You can't build a philosophical theory of the afterlife that requires a universal clock when physics has explicitly proven that the universal clock does not exist.
This leads us to a fascinating irony. The initial intuition behind GSC, the idea that only experience is experienced, which successfully dissolves the fear of the dark void, that very intuition undermines the soul it is so often used to rescue.
How so?
It dissolves the experiencer into the raw experience, but the physics of relativity proves those isolated experiences aren't lined up on a neat chronological string for a soul to slide down.
So, stripped of the cosmic cue, stripped of the metaphysical soul, and bound by the relentless geometry of relativity, GSC can't remain this vague, comforting, theory-neutral idea. It is forced into a crossroads.
It is forced to choose an explicit theory of identity. And to understand where we go from here, we have to deeply analyze the three dominant philosophical doors of personal identity. This is how humans have categorized what it means to be a self.
Let's lay out the architecture of these three doors. What is door number one?
Door number one is closed individualism. This is the default common sense operating system of almost every human being on the planet. It's what our evolutionary biology wired us to perceive.
Which is what, exactly?
Closed individualism dictates that you start existing the moment you are born and you permanently stop existing the moment you die. Each conscious life has one entirely unique, deeply separate Omer. You are you, I am me, and the gulf between our inner worlds is absolute and unbridgeable.
Why did evolution wire us this way? Because if I believe my bundle is totally separate from yours, I am highly motivated to defend my specific biological organism, find food for my specific stomach, and pass on my specific genes. Believing in a unique, closed self is an incredibly effective survival strategy.
Exactly, it is biologically useful. But philosophically, closed individualism completely fails to bridge the gap of death.
Right.
If closed individualism is the true nature of reality, when your bundle of relations breaks down, you end. Full stop. GSC cannot save you here because the internal relations that define you are physically destroyed.
So trying to combine them doesn't work.
Attempting to use GSC under a closed individualist framework is absurd. It requires you to say, I am a totally unique, physically isolated self. But don't worry, my totally unique, isolated self will magically appear in a completely different biological body when I die. It contradicts its own premise.
It's hoping for reincarnation without any mechanism for transfer. So if closed individualism is an evolutionary illusion, what is door number two?
Door number two is a radical departure. Open individualism. Open individualism posits that the boundaries between people are illusions and that there is ultimately only one subjective experience in the entire universe.
Wait, only one?
Just one. Everyone, everything that has ever possessed consciousness is the exact same experiencer, just viewing reality through different biological lenses at different coordinates in space-time.
I have to admit, I find open individualism incredibly compelling. It has this profound, almost spiritual resonance to it. It completely dissolves egoic boundaries. If I am literally you, and you are literally me, then causing harm to you is mechanically causing harm to myself. It deepens ethics and compassion to an absolute mathematical level.
It possesses a beautiful ethical elegance, and it's not merely mystical poetry. There are fascinating scientific analogies for it in physics.
Right, like the one-electron universe hypothesis. This was proposed by the physicist John Wheeler in a phone call to Richard Feynman. Wheeler noticed that every single electron in the universe has the exact same mass and the exact same charge. They are indistinguishable.
Yes, it's a great example.
So Wheeler suggested, half jokingly but mathematically soundly, what if the reason every electron looks the same is because there's actually only one single electron in the entire universe? And this one electron is just moving backward and forward through time endlessly, intersecting our three-dimensional slice of reality trillions of times, creating the illusion of a multitude of electrons.
It is a stunning concept, and open individualism applies that exact geometry to consciousness. What if all reality is a single subjective light moving through the block of time, and you are literally everyone?
But I assume internalism has a problem with this.
Internalism forces us to be rigorous, and it critiques open individualism very sharply. Internalism asks a vital question. What actually makes all these scattered, isolated experiences one? If I have absolutely no access to your memories, if we do not share a phenomenal field, if there is no co-presence, no causal link, no internal relation whatsoever between my mind and your mind right now, what does calling us one subject actually accomplish?
You saying it's just slapping a unifying label on things that are demonstrably separated.
A difference cannot be overcome just by calling everything one. If there is no shared internal relation bridging the gap between my consciousness and a bat's consciousness, inventing a cosmic ego that secretly owns both experiences is just as suspicious and just as unverifiable as inventing a personal soul.
It's just metaphysical decoration.
Exactly. Open individualism is incredibly powerful when it dissolves the personal ego, but it becomes philosophically suspect when it just replaces the personal ego with a giant universal ego. It risks reintroducing the concept of the soul at a cosmic scale.
Okay, if closed individualism is a biological illusion and open individualism is smuggling in a cosmic soul, we are left with the final option. Door number 3.
Door number 3 is empty individualism, sometimes referred to as internalist minimalism.
Let me be honest, the name alone sounds bleak. Empty individualism. It sounds fragmented. It sounds like I don't really exist.
It postulates that there are no enduring subjects at a fundamental level. There are only experiences, moments, or what philosophers call time slices of experience. Ownership is not a fundamental property of reality.
Let me pause, because this doesn't track with my lived experience. Are you saying I'm just a flickering series of disconnected moments, like dimensionless dust, or like the pixels on a television screen turning on and off? Because that sounds terrifying. I feel like a continuous flowing narrative, not a cloud of experiential static.
That is the most common and most profound misunderstanding of empty individualism. Empty individualism does not empty the experience. It empties the owner.
I need you to break that down.
Crucially, empty does not mean reality is mathematically discrete or made of chopped up, infinitely thin atoms of time. Experience itself is a thick, living, dynamic field. It has duration built into it.
Like how?
Think about the phenomenology of listening to a melody. When you hear a song, you don't hear a sequence of isolated, perfectly disconnected notes. You hear the note playing now, infused with the retention of the note that just played, and colored by the anticipation of the note about to play. Experience has a temporal thickness. It has bodily tone, attention, expectation, and momentum.
So the bundle of relations is still incredibly real.
Yes. The self is a highly complex, dynamic pattern vibrating within this living field. Memory, agency, love, narrative, trauma, these are all vibrantly, causally real as internal relations.
Okay, I'm with you.
Empty individualism doesn't deny the existence of your memories or the validity of your personality. It only denies that there is a further, separate entity standing behind the bundle, holding it all together like a metaphysical landlord. The bundle can be entirely real without being owned by a hidden knot.
Oh, I see. The empty part just means there's no little homunculus in my head watching the movie of my life. The movie's just playing, the narrative holds together because of how the scenes connect causally to one another, but there's no audience member required for the movie to exist.
Precisely. No soul, no hidden traveler, no cosmic cue, only localized fields of experience and the structural relations internal to them. Empty means ownerless at the foundation.
That actually feels, lighter. It's not about being shattered into dust. It's about realizing you don't have to carry the artificial weight of a permanent soul. But speaking of weight, this brings us to the deepest consequence of this entire framework. If we are living in a universe of empty, ownerless fields of experience, how does this alter our morality? How do we value life? And more importantly, how do we process the reality of suffering?
This is where the physics and the metaphysics force us to make a moral choice, the weight of existence. To fully grasp this, we have to layer our understanding of empty individualism with the physics of time we discussed earlier. We touched on relativity, but now we have to explicitly contrast presentism with eternalism.
Okay, let's map out the geometry of time.
Presentism is the intuitive way our biology perceives time. It dictates that only the present moment, the now, is objectively real. The past is dead and gone, existing only as chemical traces in our brains or footprints in the mud. The future does not exist at all yet. It is pure, unrealized potential. We are surfing on the razor-thin crest of the present wave.
Right. Time flows.
But eternalism, also known as block time, is the geometric reality strongly suggested, if not outright proven, by Einstein's relativity. Eternalism states that the past, the present, and the future are all equally permanently real. Time is not a flowing river. It is a giant, static, four-dimensional block of space-time.
Wow.
Every event that has ever happened, is happening, or will ever happen is permanently embedded at its specific coordinates within that block. Time doesn't flow. It just is.
The best analogy for this is to imagine a novel. The characters in Chapter 5 think they are in the present, they think Chapter 2 is gone, and Chapter 8 hasn't happened. But to you, holding the book, the ink for all the chapters is printed simultaneously. The entire story exists at once in a physical block of pages.
That is a perfect visualization. Now, I want you to combine the geometry of eternalism with the philosophy of empty individualism.
Okay, moments of experience are the fundamental reality. They don't belong to a traveling soul, and all moments in time are permanently, structurally real in the block.
If that combination is true, then unfortunate moments of intense suffering are forever crystallized in the structure of space-time. They do not fade away. When a wild animal was caught in a trap a million years ago and suffered in agony for days, that pain isn't gone just because our local clock has ticked forward.
Oh, man.
That specific experience is permanently located at those space-time coordinates. That specific time slice of experience is suffering forever.
Wow. That is horrifying. If there's no flowing river of time to wash away the pain is just structurally built into the architecture of the universe forever. Which brings us to a very heavy ethical topic, antinatalism.
Yes, antinatalism is the philosophical position that bringing new sentient life into existence is a net harm, and therefore, ethically, we should stop procreating. The most famous modern proponent of this is the philosopher David Benatar. He bases his argument on a logical asymmetry between pleasure and pain.
I want to break down Benatar's asymmetry clearly. Benatar argues that the presence of pain is undeniably bad, and the presence of pleasure is undeniably good. But we have to look at what happens when you don't bring a person into existence.
Right, the absence of existence.
The absence of their potential pain is a good thing. We prevented suffering. However, the absence of their potential pleasure is not a bad thing because there's no existing person who is deprived of it. You can't miss a party if you don't exist.
Exactly.
Therefore, according to Benatar, not being born has all the benefits, zero pain and none of the drawbacks, because a non-existent entity cannot experience deprivation.
It is a logically airtight argument within a specific framework. But notice how Benatar's asymmetry relies entirely on door number one, closed individualism. It relies heavily on the assumption that by procreating, you are creating a brand new, isolated soul out of the void. You are creating a narrative being with a temporal extension. You are throwing a new, vulnerable passenger onto the train of existence who otherwise would have remained safely in the void.
You're right. It assumes the universe is a blank slate, and you're injecting a distinct new soul into it that risks being harmed. But how does this change if we shift the perspective to door number 3, empty individualism?
Under empty individualism, the reality of suffering becomes infinitely more acute. Because fundamental entities exist as localized moments of experience rather than long, continuous narrative streams, every single time a sentient creature suffers, a moment of experience gets to have its entire, complete existence defined by pain.
Because that specific moment doesn't have a past or a future to balance it out. The moment is the entity.
Exactly. You cannot say, well, the animal suffered, but it had a good life overall, or we can make it up to the child later with a nice reward. There's no way to make it up to them because the self that suffered the pain does not endure to enjoy the reward. The moment of agony is isolated, complete, and eternally embedded in the block.
That's incredibly heavy.
When you view reality through the lens of empty individualism, antinatalism becomes incredibly compelling, not out of misanthropy, but out of pure, unadulterated compassion. You aren't just saving a person from a tough life, you are preventing the instantiation of pure moments of agony that will be permanently etched into the fabric of space-time.
But wait, let's shift the lens one more time to door number 2.
Yeah.
What if open individualism is true? What if there is only one universal subject of experience exploring every possible coordinate?
If open individualism is true, the ethical foundation of antinatalism completely collapses.
Walk me through the logic. Why?
Because under open individualism, you cannot help anyone or prevent anything by simply refusing to procreate. The one subject of existence has already been born. It is already awake in the universe.
Oh, I see where this is going.
If highly ethical humans decide to stop reproducing on Earth to prevent suffering, the universal subject is still out there, experiencing the lives of trillions of wild animals on Earth and trillions of alien species across the multiverse. You cannot put the light back in the box. The suffering is already there. The light of consciousness is already on everywhere.
So refusing to have kids under open individualism is just dropping a cup of water into a forest fire. It doesn't extinguish the flame of universal existence.
In fact, it might make the fire worse.
Okay, this is where I need to push back hard. If suffering is inevitable, and it's permanently trapped in a block universe and there isn't even a consistent me to suffer it over time, why shouldn't I just be incredibly selfish? Why care about anything? Or, on the extreme flip side, if I want to stop suffering across the board, why not become a supervillain?
A supervillain.
Yeah, why not engineer a way to painlessly, instantly destroy the entire biosphere of Earth or the universe to end the cycle? A kind of destructive antinatalism.
This is the peril of gazing too deeply into the abyss without understanding biology. Both utter selfishness and destructive antinatalism are fundamentally flawed policies, not just morally, but for a very specific, inescapable evolutionary reason.
Evolution. How does Darwinian evolution care about our metaphysical block time theories?
Because evolution dictates the physical structure of the future. The evolutionary will to power is the defining characteristic of biological life. Think about the filtering process of destructive antinatalism. Those who hate existence, those who are overwhelmed by the unbearable weight of suffering and choose not to reproduce, effectively weed themselves out of both the gene pool and the mimetic pool. The antinatalist meme is entirely self-limiting.
Oh, I see. If all the highly empathetic, compassionate philosophers who care deeply about suffering voluntarily stop having children,
Mm.
who inherits the earth?
The people who don't care. The entities that are perfectly happy, surviving, reproducing, and ignoring the collateral damage. If the compassionate bow out of the game, the future of the universe will inevitably be inherited by systems, whether they are biological organisms or eventually artificial intelligences, that optimize purely for survival, replication, and expansion, completely blind and indifferent to the suffering they cause along the way.
Trying to quietly end the human race by opting out is a massive gamble that leaves the rest of the biosphere, and potentially the universe, to burn under the control of ruthless optimizers.
Exactly. So what is the ethical imperative then? If we accept empty individualism and we accept that moments of suffering are profoundly real and eternally embedded in space-time, what is our responsibility?
We have to stay in the game.
We must stay in the game. The ethical imperative is to actively build a future free from suffering. We have to use our unique intelligence to map the biological and neurological roots of pain and systematically engineer ways out of it. This is a concept known as hedonic recalibration.
Let's unpack hedonic recalibration. This means altering our biology so that our baseline of existence isn't constant low-level suffering and desire.
Yes, eliminating the adaptive need for pain entirely. Pain was a useful evolutionary tool to keep our ancestors away from fire and predators, but we are reaching a point where we might not need it. We use our dream time, this incredibly rare window in planetary history where we have the technological resources to care about more than just bare survival, to build physical systems and biological architectures that prioritize well-being.
We have to fix the architecture of the block universe going forward. We have to populate the future coordinates of spacetime with fields of joy, rather than trying to blow the block up.
Precisely. Because suffering does not require a soul to burn. The womb is real, the agony is real, even without a metaphysical landlord owning the pain. The terror of the animal in the trap is absolute, regardless of whether it possesses a permanent identity. Our ethical responsibility is to the fields of experience themselves, wherever and whenever they spark into existence.
This has been a monumental journey. I wanted to try to synthesize where we've landed today. We started with the intuitive comfort of generic subjective continuity. The idea that from the inside, you never experience the dark gap of unconsciousness. We realized that while this is a phenomenological fact, it becomes a trap if you use it to guarantee that a personal soul survives the destruction of the body.
We systematically stripped away the soul as a traveler. We used the physics of Einstein's relativity to destroy the idea of a cosmic waiting room, proving that without a universal now, the concept of your identity picking up its next ticket is scientifically incoherent. We were forced to confront how we view identity, and we found that both closed individualism and a cosmic open individualism rely on smuggling in magical entities that we cannot verify.
Which left us with empty individualism, or internalist minimalism, the idea that there are no permanent owners, only think living fields of experience.
And here is the ultimate synthesis. The vast philosophical distance between open individualism and empty individualism shrinks dramatically when you finally remove the ghost of the soul. At first glance, they seem like polar opposites. Open says everyone is one subject, empty says there are no subjects at all. But if both frameworks reject the permanent soul and both deny the ultimate hard separateness of egoic persons, they converge into almost the same reality.
How exactly do they converge?
Open individualism, stripped of the idea of a giant, watchful cosmic ego, just means all experiences are equally modes of the universe experiencing itself, not the private possessions of separate souls. Empty individualism, stripped of the terrifying idea of fragmented, disconnected atoms of time, just means experiences are vibrantly real, flowing fields without permanent owners, held together by internal structural relations. They're describing the exact same landscape from two different angles. What we are left with at the bedrock of reality are fields of experience and the internal relations that bind them. Unity must be found in internal relation, memory, and compassion, not in metaphysical branding.
Death is not an experience nothingness. The lights do not go out from the inside. But neither is death a personal travel agency booking you a flight to a new biological life. There's no conductor waiting in the dark to punch your ticket.
There are only fields of experience, lighting up the cosmos wherever the physical conditions allow. Where the internal relations are rich enough, where memory and narrative bind the moments together, we call that beautiful pattern a person. Where those relations break down, specific person ends. But the light of experience, the raw phenomenological field, continues elsewhere, unbound by the illusion of the traveler.
I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to turn over in your mind. Think about the person you were 10 years ago. Picture them clearly. Now think about the person you will be tomorrow morning. If what we've unpacked today holds true, if there's no hidden traveler, no solid, indestructible soul passing the baton through the corridors of time, then that past you and that future you are essentially different people. They're connected only by the fragile, shifting biological bridge of your memories and habits. Are you constantly sacrificing the very real, very vibrant field of your present experience for a future self that is, in reality, nothing more than a metaphysical ghost? If ultimate ownership is an illusion, what are you going to do with the only thing you actually possess, this exact, thick, beautiful, fleeting moment of experience? Keep diving deep. We'll catch you on the next one.